Okay, so we're going to start talking about the scientific method, just real briefly. You've had it many times, but there's a couple of parts on it that are a little bit complicated and some people still have a hard time with. For my AP students, the AP exam expects you to know a lot of this, and you need to know how it works, and you need to be able to use it in detail. So let's go ahead and get started. So the steps in the scientific method, real briefly. There's observation, hypothesis, experiment, data collection, conclusion, retest. Okay, so we're going to start with observations. An observation is gathered through your senses. Basically, a scientist notices something in their natural world. So here's a question. This will show up on Play Pause It. Okay, so an example of an observation might be noticing that many salamanders near a pond have curved, not straight tails. Well, hypothesis. This is a suggested solution to the problem. It must be testable, and it's sometimes written as an if-then statement. If you actually look at the word, hypo means less than, and thesis means statement. So it's less than a statement of fact, it's a prediction. Something that might be true. It predicts an outcome. So an example of a hypothesis might be that the salamanders have curved tails because of a pollutant in the moist soil where they live. It's a prediction. We don't know if it's true. It's just a possibility. Next, we do an experiment. We test the hypothesis. Okay, so an observation is made using what? Okay, so with the experiment, we have variables. This is a factor in the experiment that is being tested. This is where things get a little bit confusing. Okay, a good or a valid experiment will only have one variable. You only change one thing. So let's talk about why we change one thing. Let's say I set up a plant and I don't know anything about plants. So I want to find out if plants need water, and I want to find out if plants need light. So to save time, I'm going to test both of those things at once. So I'm going to put one plant in the closet, and I'm going to water that plant. And then I'm going to put another plant in the windowsill, and I'm not going to water that one. At the end of a couple of weeks, I look at the plants, and I have 2 dead plants. What killed them? I don't know. Maybe the water killed the plant. Maybe the sunlight killed the plant. Because I changed 2 things, I don't know which one caused the plant to die, so I didn't learn anything. Okay, so an experiment changes one factor and observes or measures what happens. The experimenter makes a special effort to keep other factors constant so that they will not affect the outcome. These are called the control variables. They're not being tested. We want to keep those the same. Okay, so why must an experiment have only one variable? So what is the purpose of a control? They're not being tested. They're used for comparison. We want to make sure they are not causing changes in the experiment, so we keep as many of those in the same as possible. Now this is where some branches of science are more easy than others. In environmental science, it's very hard to do controlled experiments outside because you can't have 2 areas that are exactly the same. So what you do is you get as many areas as you can, try to get them as much alike as you can, and make as many measurements as you can. In a laboratory, it's easy. You put light on both plants, it's the same kind of light for the same kinds of plants. But when you're outside, it's a little more difficult. The factor that is changed is known as the independent variable. The factor that is measured is called the dependent variable. This is the most complicated part of this whole section. And On the AP exam, they will expect you to know this. So suppose you want to figure out the fastest route to walk home from school. You're going to try several different routes and time how long it takes you to get home by each one. Since you're only interested in finding a route that's fastest for you, you are going to do the walking. So what are the variables? Varying the route is the independent variable. That's the thing that we're changing. The time that it takes is the dependent variable. That's what we're measuring. It depends on the route. The time it takes is going to depend on which route you take. Keeping the same walker throughout makes the walker a control variable. Other controls would be the type of shoes you're wearing, the weather, amount of times you hit the stoplight red. All of those things need to be kept the same. So if you're doing an experiment checking whether a plant needs light to grow, what would be the dependent variable? Okay, so it's best to make several trials with each independent variable. Maybe you didn't feel good one day when you were walking. Maybe you felt a little bit better and you were walking faster. Maybe you drank a bunch of caffeine before you left and it was making you go faster. If you do several trials, those things will even out. Okay, so in an invalid experiment, you need to have two groups, a control group and an experimental group. There should be only one variable. Next, you have data. You have two kinds of data. These are your results of the experiment. Quantitative is a number. Qualitative is not a number, anything that's not a number. So quantitative is like 4 centimeters, 5 inches. It has 5 leaves instead of 3 leaves. Qualitative is the plant's alive or it's dead. The leaves turn brown. The leaves are a brighter green. Those are all qualitative data. They have to be organized into charts, tables, or graphs. Most people need to see them in a chart or a table or a graph to be able to make sense of the data. Finally, you have your conclusion. This is the answer to the hypothesis, and it's based on the data obtained from the experiment. Is your hypothesis right or wrong? So in order to verify the results, experiments must be tested. Retested, I'm sorry. So yes, you do it once and then you retest it. There have been some very embarrassing things where major studies discover something and they send it out and nobody else could retest, get the same results. You have to retest enough that you're certain it's going to happen. So basically, you identify your problem, state your observations, form a hypothesis, design an experiment, collect data, and then form a conclusion. Just a quick word about the hypothesis. Remember, I didn't go over this when we were talking about it, but I should have. So if I have a hypothesis and my hypothesis is that fire is cold, you think that's a good hypothesis? It's wrong, isn't it? But it's still a good hypothesis because it is testable. I can very easily test to see if fire is cold. So a hypothesis doesn't have to be true, it just has to be testable. If my hypothesis is fire is cold, I test it by sticking my hand in the fire. I know the answer now, right? Doesn't matter that my hypothesis is wrong, I now know what fire is like. Okay, so that's the scientific method. Next I'm going to show you a quick video showing someone using the scientific method to find out an answer to a problem at home.